Hi there guys, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Susan Nethercutt. I am a long-time professional artist and of late doing my Masters in Visual Art. As part of my Masters, I was fortunate enough recently to do my first artist's residency in Tasmania, which was such a wonderful experience. So I made sure that I videoed the whole thing, and I have two beautiful videos coming your way. This one today is going to show you how I prepared for the artist residency, because it's a bit of a thing thinking through all the things to take with you when you go away to make art. And I'll also cover the research that I did in the archives while I was there. I had a couple of different really exciting archives to look at for my masters, and I also had my birthday there and had a wonderful trip to Mona, which is the fantastic museum of new and old art in Hobart, and also did a few beautiful trips to national parks. So grab yourself a cuppa and settle in as I fill you in on my first artist residency and research trip in Tasmania. You can see me here packing up my oil paints box. I really wanted to do oil painting on this trip, which was not a convenient choice to make because oil paints dry really slowly, and I knew that I would be making art mostly in the second week of the trip, so I wouldn't have a lot of drying time. So I really had to think through the process of how I was going to do that. So the first step was to pack up the paints and pack them up in a way that they aren't going to leak and make a mess as I'm traveling. So I've double bagged all of my mediums, etc., and tried to make everything as compact as possible because, as you can see, my oil painting area at home is quite large. I also had to think through, what mediums to take, such as a fast drying medium, so things could be as dry as possible, which brushes I was going to pack, and just try and be as thoughtful about the amount of stuff I was taking, because even though I was able to take my car on this trip because I went on a ferry over to Tasmania, so that was good, I didn't have to fly, I still needed to really think through things like the drying process. So as I was working through and troubleshooting how I was going to oil paint on this trip, I realized that I was going to have to do something about my substrates and how I stored my substrates. You can see me here in this video. I am making temporary linen boards. So I have a bit of a technique in my practice where I have boards cut to the size of the framed canvases that I buy commercially. And I sort of semi-stretch the boards with a bit of linen and some very heavy-duty tape to paint on, just so that they're a lot less pressure, and if I mess them up and they're not already stretched, I just feel less pressure. And also I sometimes use techniques that require panels rather than stretched linen. So you can see me here preparing these temporary linen boards that I'm going to take away. I also had some framed ACM panels, which are aluminium composite panels, which are another alternative to having a wooden panel. And I had these sitting around for a while in my studio, and they had been primed with gesso, but I really wanted them to be linen panels, so I decided just to turn them into linen panels. So I simply went through and cut the linen to size. I have a roll of clear primed linen that I keep in my studio, and I used some medium to adhere the cut linen onto the panels, which you can see me doing here. I'd actually held off for ages making my own linen panels, and I don't know why, because it was actually an extremely easy process to do, especially since I had the cut to size ACM panels already there. But it also made me realize that it would be incredibly simple for me just to cut timber panels and do the same thing down the track. So that's definitely something that I'm going to consider for the future, because I really enjoy working on a linen panel. When I was trying this out, I did my first panel just with PVA, and then I tried the subsequent ones with watered down matte medium, which I actually preferred in the end. So in case you're thinking of doing this yourself, that was just my preference that I discovered in trying it out. You can see here the pre-made frames that fit the panels and how beautifully these have come up. So I'm really excited to see what I'm going to use these for on the trip. As I mentioned, I had to think through really carefully how I was going to store the painted panels once they were painted for the trip home, because they wouldn't be completely dry given that they were oil paint. So I had a couple of old cardboard boxes lying around, and I decided to make some storage systems within those boxes so that I could transport wet painted panels on them. So you can see me here going through the process of figuring that out and figuring out the sizes and the whole process for making sure that each of the levels that I put into these boxes protected the level above it so that the cardboard wouldn't touch the painted panel. It ended up taking so much longer than I thought it would. I thought it'd be a few hours, and it ended up being several days as I troubleshooted and worked my way through all the things I needed to make them work properly. But now I have them and they fit the sizes of the panels that I use most frequently. They'll be really, really useful for any other trips that I do, because I often do paint when I go and visit my parents or go to other places in the country. So I'm really glad that I bothered to make them because now I'm going to be able to do this whenever I need to. Once I put it all together and placed all the panels inside, it was hugely satisfying and I felt like a total boss. So I highly recommend going through this process of making something to make traveling with your wet painted oil panels a go, because it worked really, really well and made sure everything was protected as I was coming back from the residency. I also plan to do quite a bit of drawing on this trip, so I wanted to make a few more accordion sketchbooks to take with me. If you're familiar with my work, you will know that I love to make my accordion sketchbooks from a toned drawing paper. I use this Art Spectrum brand. It's really simple to make an accordion sketchbook. It's really just a folded piece of paper. I'm using some A3 paper here, and I simply cut it in half and then use my bone folder to get nice edges when I fold it up into an accordion or concertina shape. I love the process of working with paper, and I am making quite a few different sketchbooks in concertina format for my masters as I move through, as a way to process some of my research findings creatively, and also just as idea generation. So I'm really glad that I did this for the trip because I did use them quite a bit. I store them here in my little homemade leather folio that I take out with me when I go sketching. It's a really handy little folio, this one, and I'm so glad that I made it for myself. I've used it so much ever since. I keep all of my accordion sketchbooks in here. Some of them are for drawing, some are in watercolour paper for watercolour. I have a lovely slimline watercolour palette that I keep in here as well, with its little swatch card, and so that I can make watercolour paintings on the go. I have a little watercolour brush that I keep in there as well, and usually a pencil. So I can just throw this in my handbag and have it with me anytime I feel inspired to make a drawing. When it was ready to pack up and pack the car and get going, my studio was an absolute pigsty of organised chaos. I had piles of things everywhere, and I needed to get on top of that ASAP and get in the car. I had had a minor drama the week before leaving. My car broke down, the one that I had booked to go on the Spirit of Tasmania. So on the last day, I was getting new tyres fitted to our other car, our smaller car, to make that fit for travel. So it was a little bit of a runaround, but in the end, everything worked out and the car that I took worked fine, which was a relief. So I got all of those piles of organised chaos and packed them up into boxes and bags. As I mentioned, this trip wasn't just for creating art, it was also a research trip. So I had quite a few books and research materials that I wanted to take over to have as reference material for that part of my work. So there was a lot to take. So that was part of the reason it was really great that I was able to take the car, because I had a lot more space and no luggage restrictions with going on a ferry. So I packed everything up and managed to get on that boat on time. I arrived in the evening at the Spirit of Tasmania in Geelong and settled in on my recliner. I didn't have enough university funds to pay for a bed, so I just had the recliner, but I did get a window seat and I had a really great trip across Bass Strait. When I arrived at the residency location, I was gobsmacked at the view that greeted me outside the giant glass sliding doors that led from the studio out onto a balcony. It was the most beautiful space, and I couldn't believe that I was going to be able to stay here and create here for a couple of weeks. If you'd like to look up the residency, it's called All That We Are, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. It's run by Simon and Victoria, who were so incredibly welcoming, and I was thrilled to be accepted as a resident for 2 weeks. These trees that you can see me looking at outside the window became familiar friends, and I really latched onto them throughout my residency as one of the subjects that I painted and drew quite a lot. On that first day, I just allowed myself to settle in and get my feet back on solid earth. It always feels a bit strange, I think, when you get off a boat, when you've been on it for a long time. So I unpacked and got the studio set up ready for work, even though I knew that I wouldn't be making a lot of artwork in that first week. My first week in Tasmania was really focused on the research element, and also my family came over for the first week, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. So I really was just settling in and getting ready for them to come at this stage. There's also a beautiful library in this space, which was packed full of amazing art books and had a computer monitor that I could use, and was a wonderful space to do the research element in. I read in here every night. There were so many incredible books, and it was just a lovely second space to be able to work in. There was so much beautiful artwork on the walls of these spaces, and they were a constant source of inspiration. Some were by Simon, who also has a PhD in art, some were by his daughter, and several other artists as well. And it was such a beautiful space to make art in and make me feel really in the mood. So I sat down and got really clear on the things I needed to do, because for the next couple of days of this residency, I was going to be headed to Hobart into the archives to do the historical research element of my trip. The next day, I headed to TMAG, the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, where the collection of original works by Louisa Ann Meredith, who is the historical figure who's part of the focus of my master's, all her original artwork is housed here. It's owned by the Royal Society of Tasmania, and they have a room at TMAG in which I viewed these beautiful archives. I can't actually show you what I looked at because of copyright. So if you're interested in Louisa Ann Meredith and looking at any of her artworks, you can look them up on the website for the Royal Society. They have a lot of those artworks digitized, but the items I was most excited to look at were sketchbooks that she made around from the 1830s through to the 1870s. These were so full of insights and inspiration for me, and it was absolutely wonderful to go through all those archive boxes and look at all these original artworks that I've only seen digitally but give so much more information when you do see them in person and are just invaluable for art historical research. So that was an absolutely brilliant day. And on the next day, I went to Hobart Library and the Archives of Tasmania to look at the items that they had relating to Louisa Ann Meredith as well. I did most of that work in the history room, and I'm always so completely blown away by how helpful the people that work in archives are, the librarians, the archivists. They're just always so delightful and willing to help me find things. This first volume you can see me looking at is partly a sketchbook and partly a book that Louisa Ann wrote in. She started it before she moved to Tasmania when she was still living in England and had just become a young authoress. She authored and illustrated her own volumes of poetry and poetry compilations when she was in her 20s before she got married and moved to Tasmania. So this was an absolute treasure to see. And I also looked at quite a few other volumes, which was fantastic. The next day, my family and I went to Hastings Cave, which is an absolutely spectacular cave full of stalactites and stalagmites. And you can see me here just on the beautiful walk to the cave that we did beforehand. Absolutely loved this experience. My eldest daughter was really, really keen to see it, but it was a real highlight for all of us to go inside and see all the spectacular crystal formations of the cave. I took a lot of really incredible photographs of those formations, and I'm really looking forward at some point to sitting down and doing some abstract sketches of the spaces that I saw there and the shapes. It was quite spectacular. The following day was my birthday, and we went to Mona, which is the Museum of Old and New Art in Hobart. This is one of the best museums I've ever been to, and I have been to a lot of art galleries and museums. It is independently run. It is not a state institution, and you can really tell in the way that it is set up. It is very irreverent and unusual in terms of how museums usually function, and everything about it was just the most brilliant experience. So if you have never been to Mona or heard of Mona, I suggest you go and check that out, because this was definitely one of the biggest highlights of the trip. There was such a good mix of experiential art, of spaces that you could move through alongside paintings and installations. It is a delight that is fantastic for the whole family. My youngest daughter wasn't so keen on going here, and by the end of it, she was really, really enjoying it, especially when we got to some of the installation spaces that were just incredible. The next day we went to Mount Field National Park, where we did the Tall Trees Walk and went to Russell Falls. This was the most beautiful place, with gorgeous towering tree ferns and beautiful forests with extremely tall old trees. It was a wonderful experience to walk through here just for the gorgeousness of nature. It also gave me a great insight into some of the passages that my historical subject Louisa Ann Meredith wrote about in her books, about her experiences in nature in Tasmania, particularly in tree fern forests, and how enormous they were back in her day in the 19th century. So I absolutely loved this. We not only encountered trees dating back into the 1600s, which were absolutely enormous, but also a gorgeous waterfall, which was a delight to see. The next morning, my family flew home and I settled in for the next portion of the residency, where I would be making artwork in this fantastic studio relating to everything that I'd seen over the previous week, including both the archives and nature. So I started off with some collage. I really wanted to play creatively with some of the ideas that I'd been having while I was looking at the primary source material of Louisa Ann Meredith's artwork, and also seeing her sketchbooks in person was quite an experience for me. And I'd also seen some of these photographs that you can see here, the reproductions that I printed before I left and went to Tasmania. I'm playing around with cutting those out and collaging them in various ways as I'm thinking about Louisa Ann Meredith's connection with nature. I thought a little bit ahead before I came that I knew I'd be seeing some of these photographs in person for the first time, so I printed some of those off before I left to have them on hand for some collage work. And you can just see me here playing around with different ideas that I'm having for thinking about Louisa Ann Meredith's relationship with the landscape she was in, and particularly her relationship with trees. Trees became quite a theme in what I was gravitating to in the work that I was looking at of hers. She drew beautiful big gum trees and other trees in her landscapes, and I felt very drawn to the large gum trees that were in the landscape I was in as well in this place. So I felt a real kinship with her connection with nature through trees, and this really became the focus of the entire week of work that I did at the residency. I really wanted to make an accordion sketchbook to process some of these ideas. So you can see me here cutting up and folding some black paper that I got at an art store the previous week, because I felt like the old photographs really showed up well on the black paper. I just simply taped these together. I use a hinging tissue for this, but this actually fell off a bit later in the residency, so I replaced it with masking tape, which was a little bit stronger. You can see me here just playing around with some of the collage elements that I've created from the photographs of her that I printed. Here's a sketch of some trees that I made on the property that are just outside my window. And I just played around with all of this for the first day as I was thinking about Louisa Ann Meredith and her art making and her relationship with nature. It actually led me to having quite a few ideas playing around with this sketchbook. I always find when I'm doing work like this, it feels a bit unsubstantial, and I don't know that it's necessarily leading anywhere, but I feel compelled to make it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it actually led me on to having other ideas that were more substantial that you'll see play out in some of the artwork that I made in terms of paintings and other finished works by the end of the residency. It was such a delight to wake up in this space each day and to really have nothing else that I had to do except make art. It was really great for my continuity of thinking, especially in that I really wanted this residency to be a place where I could really think about the shape of my master's project and where I'm going to have my focus in terms of what I create for my final exhibition and also the exegesis that I write. So you can see me here sketching on some of the paper that I collaged the day before. I'm extending those trees that I had digitally collaged down the bottom of this artwork into drawings that come up the page. This freeform drawing with the photographs on the black paper ended up becoming really, really important to what I unfolded throughout the residency. When I was working on the last panel of this sketchbook, I couldn't stop thinking about this drawing that I had seen by Louisa Ann in the archives at TMAG. I noticed in one of the sketchbooks a sketch for a tree that I identified as being the initial sketch for a later finished drawing that she made of the same tree, which was kind of an exciting moment. Any of you out there that are researchers might relate to that kind of discovery in an archive. But I really wanted to draw that tree and have her sitting underneath it because she actually quite often inserted women drawing into the landscape that she was drawing. And I like to think that she was actually inserting herself into the landscape. But this also sparked off another idea for a painting. As a mum of two, it was an absolute delight every time I stopped for a meal to only have to feed myself and to just sit and watch some inspirational artist videos on YouTube or just chill out and look out the window. I really enjoyed that element of being at the residency, of just constantly being around artistic inspiration and being able to keep my focus on the task at hand. Having that kind of unbroken, concentrated time is really rare for me, and I drunk in every single moment of it with gratitude. After making that initial sketch in my accordion sketchbook of that beautiful tree that Louisa Ann Meredith drew, I decided I wanted to make a master study of that tree. I have been really concentrating on improving my drawing skills throughout the course of my master's. Drawing has been, I think, a weakness in my practice. It wasn't something that I trained in extensively because I didn't do a visual art degree. I did a art history degree. So I've always looked at and understood art from that perspective, but I've not made any master studies. So I had this idea that I wanted to first of all make a master study, but also that I wanted to make a drawing of that, a painting of that tree over numerous different panels that were framed in an interesting way that makes comment on the way that we frame history. So I spent many, many hours that afternoon making that drawing, and then I progressed on to setting up these panels that you saw me prepare earlier in the video to make an oil painting of my master study of Louisa's tree. So you can probably see by now that there's this whole progression that has happened throughout the course of the residency, where the research has led to the initial sketchbook has led to this idea for the paintings, and because I had prepared all of these panels earlier, I was pretty much just ready to unpack and get going with this painting. Again, there's often never a day where I can fit in that many things into a day. This was the value of doing the residency, was I was able to move quite swiftly with my ideas and make them happen fairly quickly. When I'm creating a sketch for a painting on linen, I prefer to work with white charcoal so that it doesn't darken my painting too much. And I also find it's quite easy to erase if I make a mistake. So I worked with my initial drawing to scale up and create that initial sketch, and then just painted the outline of the tree in an acrylic gouache before going in with the oils. Thought that would be a really easy, quick drying way to get my initial tree shape down on the linen before I headed in with the oil paints. I was working with a neutral palette because I really wanted to maintain the look of the sketch that Louisa made, which was just with graphite and a bit of gouache, white gouache for highlights that she used in her drawings. You can see me here just testing out the different tones of grey, finalising what I'm going to use in the painting. So it was a bit of an unusual thing to do, to choose to make what effectively was a pencil sketch in a drawing in oil paint. And I really zoned in on her drawing to get the mark making similar to her, even though I was painting it, and to really maintain the style of the drawing that she made in this painting. And while my focus was on really retaining the integrity of her sketch, I also deliberately elongated it, and it became distorted in the way that I separated the panels from each other, because I wanted the construction of the painting to actually make a comment on the kind of distortions that happen in the way that we perceive history when we experience it through an archive. It is never a direct experience of that person and the work that they made. It is always coloured by the biases of the person looking at it and the scholarship that they have already looked at. So I was really happy that I had this idea for this painting to really encapsulate those ideas, because until this point I had struggled a bit with finding my way of bringing the historical research element into my artwork. So this was a really brilliant place to leave this video for today, with this first breakthrough piece of these 6 panels of a painting that I did in the first few days of my residency. And I will be back in another video very shortly with the rest of what you're going to see of the residency, which just unfolded in so many ways that I couldn't predict. So make sure you stay tuned for the next video that will be coming very soon, where I will show you where the direction of the artwork led to after this. And I'm really curious to know if you've been on an art residency. I'd love to know where you've been. We could use the comments perhaps as a place for people to make recommendations of art residencies that they've done all around the world that they've loved. That would be fantastic. And if you haven't been on an art residency but it's something that interests you, then let me know in the comments what it is that you would love to do and get out of an art residency. If you've watched this video until the very end, why don't you leave me a boat emoji, and I'll know that you stayed until the end. And if you're not subscribed and you've enjoyed what you've seen today, then please consider subscribing, or at the very least just giving this video a like. It always really helps. All right, I will see you very soon with the next video that shows you the rest of the residency. Take care till then. I'll catch you. Bye.